Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to make a quick video presenting what's on the roadmap for CI/CD to best emulate what we have. Excuse me. To best emulate what we have in our current development process. As you can, I'll go over it in a second better. But as you can see, right now we have feature branches that get merged into Sprint. Sprint goes into not test. We'll circle back to that in a second. That was going to be a new branch, but I've talked myself out of it. So right now it goes from the feature branch into Sprint, and then some of them are called mains, some of them are called masters, so I have to accommodate for both until that gets normalized. Again, I talk about test here, but it'll make more sense in a second why I chose to skip it. Unless there's some serious objection, we'll move forward with that thought. So the demo is going to include 2 test projects. They're going to be like a whale say, kind of like Hello World sort of deal. Whale say is just Hello World with a little picture of a whale, an ASCII picture of a whale that echoes whatever you pass into it. Just Poops and Snickers little Docker container. Not anything super special, but it's proof that the Docker container works and it's building and all that other stuff. Right. So for testing, one of the projects is going to use main as the top level branch, and the other one is going to use master as the top level branch. But it's going to be the same YAML that'll just dictate basically if branch name is this or that, then do this and treat it the same. That way we don't have to merge or change the branch names, any of that other stuff. It's going to be some runners. The runners are what check out the code from GitLab and build the Docker container and tag it, push it up to container yard or to the hub. Yeah, hub, Docker, blah blah blah, whatever. Anyway, pushes it up to the repository. That's the word, Docker repository. Right. So from there, we're gonna have the main runner running on some shared box. The reason for that is the workload for that for building a container is going to can be intensive. It may not be, like if it's just a UI or a proxy, or not a UI, but if it's just a proxy, the build load is pretty light. Same thing with a Docker database thing. It's pretty light because it's just the engine that it's spinning out. There's not a whole lot to build per se. So anyway, the main workhorse is going to go of generating the images is going to go on the shared box, be a little beefier, but more importantly it'll be on a box that's not presenting the data for testing or for development users, stuff like that. And that's what I'm talking about here and there, I guess. Another runner will be on a box that for testing called CI/CD dev. The other one we'll get to in a second is CI/CD test. Again, so we're going to have a feature branch. I'll circle back. I'll keep going. It'll circle back and make more sense in a second. I apologize for the scatterbrainedness. Right, so one runner is going to be on a box called CI/CD dev. That is going to be where the containers are going to be pulled back down to. So after this shared box builds the image, pushes it up to the repository, stuff like that. It'll update the variables, the project scope variables, and the runner on this box will check out it'll acquire the variables that define the version information or version number, and update it'll update the Docker Compose file for that particular project, and then do a down and up, basically. So it takes it down and rebuilds it, and off you go. The point is there's no code like volume mounted into it at that point. It's all bundled up in this nice little container. Right, and then the other runner is going to be on CI/CD test. It's basically the same thing. It's just different container. The difference is on dev, after it pulls down that container, so that the first step, it's going to build a container and say, hey, I'm ready for the next step. Well, CI/CD dev will automatically execute that next step, which is to update the Docker Compose file and rebuild the image. Not rebuild, but deploy the latest, not the one that's tagged latest, but whatever the latest version number is, it's tagged, controlled by the project variables within GitLab. Right, so if we continue on that path, we want our testers to not have a instantly revolving version. If they're in the middle of testing, I don't want their version to update automatically, because they might be testing something and then we break it and they don't know for sure which one they're looking at. So that'll be a manual process. That's wrong. Is normal, not manual. Yep, I need to edit that. Whatever. Need to edit that. So then the test process. I'm going to create a feature branch, make a change to that branch, commit the code. It should result in no image built because I'm in the CI/CD file. It's not going to monitor feature branches. It's only going to monitor other branches. We're going to merge some of those changes indicated in 4.1. Merge 4.1 feature branch. Where was 4.1? Oh my goodness, 4.1, right? 4.1. So after it creates that, sorry, not start over, but we're going to take the feature branch that's identified in step 4.1 and merge it into Sprint, as indicated up here. We go from Sprint, from feature to Sprint. That step, that process should trigger a runner identified in 3.1 and build an image with a specific version for that particular project. In this case, let's say our project name is Super Cool Application, and there are 3 environment variables, not environment variables, but project variables within GitLab: major, minor, and build. So I got major, minor, and build. So if we're at 1.3.14, when this step executes, it'll create 15 for the increase the build number, and it'll auto increment the variable, all that other crap. And then let's, for the sake of this conversation or the demo here, we're going to assume that we roll it a couple times. Roll in a couple different people's feature branches into the Sprint branch, but not always into the next step. So it's multiple feature branches going into staging. So we're going to simulate 1.3.15, 16, and 17, whatever. Now the downside is each one of these 3, may be a downside, but each one of these will roll up to the high side and it's out of our control because it's all automated. The bonus is it's all automated. We don't have to explicitly specify which ones we're going to push up. So it's a trade-off tomato-tomato sort of thing. After however many merges into the sprint, so in this case we have 3 merges into the sprint branch, we're going to roll it out to test, which I thought about more. We'll circle back. But the thought at that time when I wrote this documentation was that it would trigger another version called 1.4-test, because we're going to increment our minor version to 1.4 and just append -test. And that also will roll up to high side. Then after testing, group says, hey, everything's good, we're ready to go ahead and release that out to master. Same thing, it's going to take the same content and just remove the -test from the tag, so it'll be 1.4. Again, it pushes up, so on and so forth. An alternative to step 5, which is actually 4.3 and 5. Yeah, instead of all this stuff, what I've decided to do, unless there's a serious objection, is to use 1.4-test which is to use 1.4-test and a test branch. The wording there doesn't make sense. Basically, get rid of the test branch. So you go from feature branch to staging straight to, or not staging, to sprint, straight up to master. However, the CI/CD file would have multiple tags, or kind of like plays in a playbook, if you were to use an Ansible, and each one of those tags will only execute on a particular branch, or in a particular tag, right? So both phases would be tagged for master. However, this one would be for like testing, and this one is for actually releasing it. The benefit here is that the code behind, or the code that's in the GitLab branch, is going to be the same on the both because it's the same branch. You can't accidentally slip in code or have code that was modified outside the confines of the branch and get confused or wrapped into it on accident. Right. So it goes from your feature branch to sprint, and then it does its own little work there, and so on. We're ready for our testing group to go ahead and do it. So we merge it in the master, and that would create a step that requires a manual build process, a manual step to go in and click a little button, say yes, go ahead and deploy it. That would, the first step would deploy that tag out to our testing group on this environment. Then after they say everything's good, there'll be another manual push, or step in the same play, basically, and you get play on that, or I forget what wording I chose for it in a second, whatever. Anyway, you push that and it'll go up to remove the dash test. See if I can keep reading and have that make more sense, because I rambled on for a minute there. Right, skip the use of test, and so like I said, just go from feature sprint to master. There is a drawback to that approach. I say it's a drawback, but I'll caveat that in a second. It prevents the manual checkout of the code. So it ensures that the code that's in that branch is always the same between testing and what's released. You can't accidentally have code that exists in test that doesn't get mirrored up to the release or production version, which I see as a bonus, not really a drawback, when you think of it that way. Let's see. Yeah, and that's what I also mentioned here. It's always going to be the same as what's in production. The only difference between the two, so the first manual push is going to be 1.4 dash test. And then after testing, it'll say, all right, we'll go ahead and we're going to remove the testing. We're good to go. It'll make it 1.4. So it's a evolving tag process. And that's what I'm talking about here. The CI/CD will have multiple steps. It's easier to trigger. Like I said, I can show you one later, but it's just a little play button within GitLab. One is a manual process. Right. So that first button to tag for testing. So the CI/CD process will do a bunch of work, and there will be this little play button, like on your old DVD or whatever. It has a play button to play that step. And that one would be called tag for testing. So clicking that button would tag it as 1.4 test and push it out to our test box for our testers to be able to complete the testing. If they come back and say, yay, we're good, then we push the next button, which is going to be labeled as tag for release, which is the same thing. All that it does is it removes the dash test from the above. Other than that, wow, that was a long video. I did not mean for it to take that long. I need to eat something. I am not going to be ready to do this demo in 15 minutes, but I have a good roadmap on what that should look like, I think. I need to fix a couple grammatical errors. Is that the right phrase? I don't know. Whatever. Fix a couple typos, we'll put it that way, in this thing. Alright, anywho, we're rambling. That's all I got right now. Hopefully I'll have a demo by this afternoon or this evening. Yeah. Deuces, y'all.